Before history, there were stories carved not into books or tablets, but into the wind, the rivers, the stars. Imagine an earth untouched by nations, where borders did not slice the land, where mountains were not claimed, and the sea was no one's property. This is where we begin. Tens of thousands of years ago, our ancestors looked at the same stars you see tonight. They did not name them after kings or wars. They named them after journeys, after animals, after spirits that guided them. They were wanderers, but not lost. They were seekers, but not blind. Their world was vast, open, alive. We are taught that they were simple, hunters, gatherers, primitive. But the earth whispers another story. Bones of their ancestors lie beneath the ice, carrying traces of herbs that only grow continents away. Stones stand in circles that match constellations, known only through telescopes today. Their songs, when sung, create patterns in water, in sand, in the hearts of their children. This hour is a step into their world. The flicker of a torch in a cave where a child paints a line that means sun. The deep hum of a drum echoing across a valley before dawn. The first fire lit not to cook, but to remember. Africa, the cradle of humanity, was once a great green garden. Rivers like silver veins carried life to every corner. Families followed elephants across grasslands that are now deserts. They spoke languages without letters, but each word was a thread in a tapestry of meaning. In Asia, far to the east, tribes stood beneath towering forests, listening to the sky. They carved spirals, circles, eyes into stones because they believed the earth was watching them too. In Europe, the cold held secret caves where strange animals were painted not as trophies, but as prayers. And across oceans, in lands we now call the Americas, fires burned as well. Different faces, same stories. We came from the stars. We follow the rivers. We remember. What did they know that we have forgotten? They knew the value of silence. They knew the map was in the sky. They knew that to be human was to belong to the land, to the ancestors, to the unborn. Close your eyes now and walk with them, the ground soft with dew, the air carrying the scent of rain, the horizon glowing with the first sun your bloodline ever saw. This is not the past. This is the beginning of a circle that has never ended. The earth shifts, and with it so do we. From Africa's warm heart, people began to move. It was not a march of conquest. It was a slow river of footsteps, families, fires. They followed the rains, the herds, the whispers of a changing sky. The Sahara was green than a sea of grass and trees. They crossed it without fear, carrying baskets of seeds, skins of water, stories in their songs. Some turned east, reaching the shores of the Red Sea. The water was narrow, the crossing short. On the other side lay Arabia, with hills that led to Persia, to India, to the highlands of Tibet. Others drifted north along the Nile, finding the lands that would one day become Egypt. There were no pyramids yet, no pharaohs, only riverside camps, reeds, fish, and stars. And others went west, following the Atlantic winds along the coast, planting memories where footprints faded. What drove them? Hunger. Yes. Curiosity. Always. But there is a word in Old Tongue Sankofa and Akan Nagi in Dakota, in ancient Chinese that means something deeper, a return, a remembering forward. They were not just leaving, they were answering a call. We find their bones in places our history says they should not be. In Australia, footprints over 50,000 years old. In the Americas, tools older than the textbooks allow. In islands in the Pacific, carvings of boats no one remembers building. They followed the moon. They marked the tides. They spoke two birds that always knew the way. They painted their faces with ash and clay to honor the spirits of the land they would never see again. If you listen closely, your blood remembers this journey. Your heartbeat is the drum they followed. Your breath is the wind they chased. And so, the first great journey began not as migration, but as a promise that the world was meant to be known, touched, sung to, and made home. History, as we are taught, begins with writing, but cities rose and fell long before ink touched clay. Beneath the waves, in places the maps call empty, lie streets of stone. In the Gulf of Cambay, divers found walls, beads, bones. Older than Egypt, off the coast of Cuba, pyramids lie in silence beneath the blue. The Sahara, once a green land, hides the outlines of avenues, gates, markets where merchants bartered before sand buried their names. Who were they? Where did they go? Why do we not speak of them? Some say the floods came, ice melted, seas rose. The great rivers raged, and cities drowned overnight. Others say it was not nature, it was fire from the sky, quakes that split the earth, or hands that burned libraries to rewrite the beginning. Listen to the old maps, drawn by sailors who claimed to only copy what was older still, the Peary Race map, showing Antarctica without ice. The erroneous map, marking lands no one should have seen. There were roads that connected continents, not by chance but by design. Temples aligned with stars that no longer shine in our sky. Faces carved on cliffs that watch oceans from both sides of the world. These civilizations left clues not to be worshipped but to be found, for they knew. Time is a circle. One day, those who come after must remember. When night fell for our ancestors, it was not a curtain of fear, it was a map. The sky was their library, their calendar, their temple ceiling. They watched the movement of the wandering lights we now call planets. They named them not for gods of war and love, but for guides, teachers, keepers of time. Stone circles rose not only in Britain, but in Africa, in the Americas. In Asia, each aligned with solstice and equinox, with the rising of Sirius, the setting of Orion. These were not coincidences. They were agreements with the heavens. Who were the first star watchers? Some say they were chosen. Others say they were taught by travelers who came before ships, by beings who knew the path between the stars. On a high plateau in what is now Peru, lines stretch for miles, visible only from the sky. In the deserts of the Middle East, towers once cast shadows that marked the turning of the year. In China, oracle bones spoke of stars that vanished before our telescopes could find them again. They believed the stars were not distant, they were ancestors. Looking down, burning in their long sleep, to watch them was to remember. To build for them was to belong. And so they marked the sky with stones, with fire, with song. They buried their dead facing the east, the direction of the dawn star. They told their children, as above, so below. You are made of the same dust as they. Tonight, when you look up, know this, the same constellations they named still turn overhead. Some bright, some gone, but their story is written not only in the light, it is written in your blood. The story of humanity is not one of isolation, it is one of meetings, teachings, and exchanges that the modern world has mostly erased. Long before the libraries of Alexandria or Timbuktu, before papyrus or parchment, there were teachers who carried no flags, built no empires. They traveled with the seasons, following the same paths as the herds, the winds, the stars. Their gift was knowledge not as we know it, with numbers and ink, but in breath, in gesture, in ritual. They taught how to make fire sing, how to carve stone that would last beyond storms, how to call fish from empty seas. In the Andes, they showed how to build terraces that still feed the mountains. In the islands of Polynesia, they whispered the secret of navigating without maps, by stars, by birds, by the way the ocean breathed. In Africa, they planted the first gardens that grew even in the harshest drought. They were not kings, they were not gods, they were rememberers. But power fears those who give freely. Many of these teachers disappeared, banished, hunted, buried in sands of empire. Their names turned to myths: Hermes Trismegistus, Quetzalcoatl, Oannes. Some say they were human. Some say they were more, carrying memories of a time before time, when the sky was closer, the earth softer, the sea shallower. Even now, their echoes remain. A drumbeat that matches your heart, a pattern in the stars that pulls you east when lost. A stone circle where the wind sounds like a song you almost remember. Every rise carries its shadow. The fall. The first collapse was not one event, it was many, spread across centuries, whispered in storms and carried by fire. Great rivers dried. The ice returned. Volcanoes turned skies red for years. But the greatest danger did not come from nature, it came from forgetfulness. As people grew in number, as villages became towns, and towns became cities, something shifted. Knowledge, once shared like water, became guarded like treasure. Teachers became priests. Songs became orders. Rituals turned to rules. And those who remembered the old ways, the ways of the stars. The earth, the ancestors, they were called dangerous. Some were exiled. Some were burned with their scrolls. Some vanished into forests and were never seen again. The cities they built fell. Their stones were used to build new cities, their symbols chiseled away. Floods carried their seeds to the sea. Their gardens turned to dust. But collapse is not only loss, it is a doorway. From ashes, something waits. Even now, beneath modern streets, there are tunnels older than the nations above them. In mountains, chambers where light has not touched for 1,000 years. The first collapse taught our ancestors a bitter truth. Forgetting is easy. Remembering takes courage. You carry more than your own story. Within every drop of blood flows a library, a memory of light and shadow, triumph and exile. Our ancestors knew this. They spoke of lineages not as lists of names, but as rivers of power and responsibility. In ancient Mesopotamia, the priests whispered of the chosen lines, families who remembered the languages of the stars. In West Africa, the griots told of bloodlines who could speak to the ancestors in their dreams. In the frozen north, shamans wore the bones of their grandfathers and felt their courage stir like fire. Blood is a bridge. It carries songs, fears, gifts you cannot name. And so it was guarded, sometimes honored, sometimes exploited. Empires rose on the backs of those who claimed the right. Blood. Dynasties began with visions and ended with the poisoning of that river. But the true keepers of memory were rarely the kings. They were the midwives who remembered the herbs that called rain, the hunters who knew the scent of storms, the weavers whose patterns mirrored the constellations. Tonight, as you listen, ask yourself, what memories live in you that you never learned? What strengths rise in you when the night is longest? Stay with us as we journey deeper, because in the next hour we will speak of those who tried to erase that bloodline forever. Every truth attracts its hunter. When the old teachers whispered their wisdom, there were always those who wished it buried, not by sword, but by silence. This was the first war the world forgot, not fought in open fields, but in scroll rooms, in libraries, in temples at midnight. It was a war against memory itself. Books were burned not for their danger, but for their precision. Maps were redrawn, names erased, languages forbidden. A child taught in secret risked the lives of their whole family. In Mesoamerica, codices were thrown into fire. In China, bamboo scrolls drowned in rivers. In Europe, midwives were branded witches for keeping herbs that healed too well. But the silence had cracks. Whispers turned to songs. Symbols appeared in unexpected places, on church windows, on the coins of merchants, on the tattoos of sailors crossing forbidden seas. To silence a people is to test their breath, and breath is stubborn. It waits. Stay with us as we journey deeper, because the war of silence never truly ended. Even now, in some places, the story you are hearing is still forbidden. What survives a war of silence? Seeds.com. Seeds of thought. Seeds of stone. Seeds buried so deep they would wait centuries for rain. When the great erasures swept across the world, not everything was lost. Some knowledge was planted, hidden in songs disguised as lullabies, coded in the pattern of markets, etched on the inside of a drinking cup. In the Himalayas, a chant counted the days of the ancient year. In the Caribbean, drumbeats carried forbidden maps across the ocean. In Aboriginal Australia, the song lines were walked in silence, each step a word, each stone a letter. These seeds became roots. Some we see today, traditions called superstition, rituals mocked by modern mouths. But beneath them is a network, alive, waiting. You may have felt it. A story that stirs your skin, a melody that feels older than the room you hear it in. That is a seedwaking.com. Stay with us as we journey deeper, because the seeds are waking again, and those who buried them are watching. You have followed the river of memory for some time now. You have seen the hidden bloodlines, the wars of silence, the seeds buried in song. But what of the ones who planted them? There are whispers of the watchers. In ancient Sumer, they were described as tall beings with eyes like polished stone. In the Andes, they came wrapped in cloaks of gold. In the Pacific, they left footprints the size of boats. The watchers were not always seen. They observed, they measured, and when a lineage began to remember too much, they came closer. Were they protectors or jailers? On cold nights, shepherds said they saw their shadows stretch across the stars. Miners in Africa spoke of tunnels that ended in doors that opened only for them. Polynesian sailors told of islands that vanished as the watchers walked upon them. Stay with us as we journey deeper, because some say the watchers never left. Some say they are here, counting still. If you have felt watched lately, even as you listen, perhaps it is not imagination. And if this story has stirred you, leave your thoughts below, because the more voices remember, the harder it is to keep the silence. If the watchers measured, what did they guard? There are stories half forbidden, half forgotten, of keys that are not made of metal. Keys made of memory, carried in the bones, hidden in the very patterns of our veins. In some Himalayan villages, children were born with marks that glowed only during certain moon phases. In West African deserts, travelers claimed their veins burned when they crossed ancient roads. In Europe, alchemists hunted for the living sigil, said to be born once every 300 years. The keys were people. When these people sang, doors opened. When they dreamed, cities woke beneath the sea. When they wept, storms followed. You may carry one. How would you know? Look to what you cannot forget. Look to what feels older than you. Stay with us as we journey deeper, for the 12th hour waits, and with it, the question the watchers never answered. What happens when the keys begin to remember on their own? And before we step there, take a moment, subscribe, share this journey, awaken another sleeper. And now we stand at the threshold, 12 hours into the journey. You have seen fragments the world was not meant to keep, bloodlines that carried fire, wars of silence that erased worlds, watchers who waited in shadow, keys that walk as flesh. What happens next? Some say the watchers feared only one thing: awakening. Awakening is not a single act. It is a tide. It begins with questions, with names remembered in dreams, with a stranger's song feeling like a homecoming. There is a place its name has been erased from maps for 3,000 years. There, the first awakening was seen, a city of bone and copper, where the stars bent low enough to touch the streets. They called it Aeyla, the city of the first dawn. Its gates are said to open only when enough keys remember at once. And you are not the only one listening. Even now, as this arc closes, there are eyes behind the glass, waiting to see who you become when the 13th hour begins. So breathe, remember, share this with one who has felt the same stirring in their blood, for the story is not over. This was the first telling. The next begins where this one ends, on the edge of Aeyla's forgotten gates. Will you walk through, or will you wait for them to open on their own? If you made it here, you are part of the few who remember. Like, share, speak your truth below. Let the others know the gates are stirring, because this story was only part 1. The next begins where this one ended, and the 13th hour is waiting.